Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 361 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. I'm your host, Anthony Arena. The show notes are located at continuefit.com or strengthcoachpodcast.com. All right, today on the strengthcoach.com and mbsc.tv Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about loaded flies. So this stems from an Instagram post about when he was doing some sprints and they're dragging 135 for the fly-in 10s with a 10-yard fly-in, and it didn't really work. It was too slow. So they're back to the drawing board and spoke to Coach Boyle all about like why he's doing this and why he's choosing the weight he's choosing and what he looks for. Also spoke to him about a tweet from Coach Carmen Bott about not becoming Mr. Fix-It with sprinting mechanics. All right, AG1 by Athletic Greens, 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. Helps me to fill in those gaps in my nutrition-free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. With your first purchase, go to athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by AG1 by Athletic Greens, I have on Kevin Neeld, head performance coach for the Boston Bruins. We're mostly going to talk about his timeline for off-season training, really what he's trying to accomplish, what all his goals are. We're also going to talk about development camp. What is it? It's kind of a unique thing for the most part to the NHL, so what his goals are there. We're going to talk about one of his articles, Developing Breaks for Speed, and 3 load and volume strategies to think about. We're also going to talk about movement variability, what it means for him, and what the dangers are of coaches misinterpreting the idea. That and so much more coming up with Coach Kevin Neeld. Naamly, maximizing the member experience segment with Sumit Seth. Sumit is the founder of Naamly. Today he's going to talk about putting yourself in your client's shoes using 2 acronyms, F.O.R.D, F.O.R.D, and one he made up, F.O.R.M. So really good stuff, as always, coming up from Sumit in a little bit. Don't forget, Naamly helps you build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, Naamly.com. You can schedule a demo, get a feel for what it's all about, what the software can do for you. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Guys, Perform Better online sale right now, 50% off a bunch of stuff, all the important stuff, including bumper plates, kettlebells, dumbbells. Check all that at performbetter.com. There's 2 summits left. I just got back from Long Beach. I spoke there, but I also went to a couple presentations and just kind of wanted to touch on that for a second, just the importance of live presentations. I went to Dennis Dunphy and Stick Mobility to go watch him, and I have 2 sticks, and I have the course, but I gotta say, like when you're live and Dennis is talking to you about this stuff, it's so different. I also went to Greg Rose talking about really mobility for rotational athletes, and he got into some Eldoa stuff. So same stuff. Greg went over this stuff and it was amazing for me, and I do have the course, and it just kind of takes it to another level. So Chicago is this week. Providence is coming up. Guys, take advantage of those hotel discounts. You can't get that at Chicago at this point, but in Providence. And listen, if you're having some financial trouble, call Perform Better. Let them know your situation. Maybe you want to go for one day. Maybe you want to go and bring your staff. They'll work something out with you. Their motto is that they do not turn anyone away. Their mission is to get trainers as educated as possible. Don't let the cost hold you back, guys. They will work something out with you. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the strengthcoach.com and mbsc.tv Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Guys, try strengthcoach.com out for 7 days for free. Totally new format, user-friendly, same great forum as always. You can go to strengthcoach.com check out the 7-day trial. Also, NBSC.TV, they have a lot of cool stuff on there. There's staff meetings, and there's a lot of stuff that Kevin and the boys put on there, but they also do outside stuff too. They just had a webinar with Billy Hofacker about finances. So they get guests to come on in too. So go to NBSC.TV for that. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, although it just started raining here. We'll give Mike Potenza the weather report. It was nice this morning, currently rainy, and tonight is Yacht Rock Review. So that'll be fun for our older listeners. I said that to one of the young ladies that works at the gym, and she said, "What is Yacht Rock?" And I was like, "Wow,
Come on." Yeah. That's kind of sweeping our generation. You go to those shows, it's crazy. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun." Some people take it way too serious. We went to the first one not knowing that there would be 300 guys in captain's hats and white shirts. That would be, people take it real serious.
Yeah, very cool. Coach, you tried a flying 10 with 135, so pulling 135 pounds. So you said it was too heavy. You had a 10-yard fly-in. You're going to try 100 pounds next week. Okay, my first question is for everybody, just tell everybody, why would you be doing this with some weight behind you? And why would you be going down 35 pounds, like from 135 to 100? Can you just talk about why you're doing this?
Yes. So one, I do think that from a speed development standpoint, I don't know if there's anything better than resisted sprinting. When you think about teaching somebody to put force down and back into the ground, turf, track, whatever, I don't think there's anything better that you can do than that. We've been experimenting. We went up to 90, and guys we're trying to get basic. So the way that it works, and this is sort of Cam Joss, JB Marin via Cam Joss, the idea of a 50% speed decrement. So you want to slow down by 50%. So that means the time you're looking for is 150% of your 10 for the same distance. And people get screwed up because of the math. But if you basically if you take your 10 time,
let's call it 2 seconds. Let's just say, because that's easy math.
If you take your 10 time and you add a half to it.
Okay.
So if it's 1.2 and then you add 8, which is 6.6 rather, which is half 1.2, you get 1.8. So the idea for us was that most of our guys were around 1.3. So it was like 1.95. So we started with this idea, okay, resisted sprinting for us, we want to be under 1.95 for 10 yards with a 10-yard fly-in. So basically, we're same idea. We're running 20. We're timing the last 10. And we were getting 90 pounds. We were getting some 1.7s. We were getting some times that were really low. So we just said, okay, let's just throw, because you're doing it again. It's like the plate-based warm-up idea. Let's just throw another plate on and see what happens. And so I threw it up there because I wanted people to look. And what happened was it was a little too much. And you're like, okay, that slowed it down. It had a little bit of that truck stuck in the mud kind of look versus, hey, it looks a lot like sprinting. And it wasn't terrible. If you look, I think Mark was the second one. It didn't look awful, but it just was a little bit too much. So as you said, why are we going down 35 pounds? We're going 35 pounds because we can put a 10 on. It's, it's really, there's so little real science to it and so much of, okay, first, we do 45 the first time we put one plate on. We do 70 the second time because we put a 45 and a 25 on. Then we go to 90 because we take the 25 off and we replace it with a 45. So I should have thrown the 25 on just for giggles to see what 115 would look like. But I said, let's try 135 because it's not as if you're going to ruin somebody's sprinting form by having them do a resisted sprint that's too heavy one day and suddenly, oh my God, now they can't run fast anymore. That's not going to happen. So I do think sometimes you want to play with stuff and look at it, think, okay, did that work? I would look at that and say, didn't work, too heavy. But it also gives us a benchmark in terms of as these guys continue to get stronger. The one kid who moved it in 2 seconds, and I should have put him in there, but he was a big offensive lineman. He's like 260. So, he was moving closer to half his body weight versus in some cases 3/4 of his body weight. And he was around 2, and he's not as fast as the other guys. But in terms of being able to move a load, he's better. So that was sort of the thought process.
Yeah, Mike, what about like how many guys were doing it that day? How many kids?
Probably 6 or 7, and we have
Okay.
4 sleds.
Yep.
So
And how much variability, like, so for example, athlete one, he's fine. He gets, he goes at one, let's say he does 100, you do 100 pounds. And let's say he gets 1.8. And then the next athlete is 2.1. Are they pretty consistent across the board? Or is it like, we got to start, this guy needs this weight, this guy needs that weight?
they are consistent across the board, but yes. So I've got some guys, everybody warms up with 45. Everybody's first one is 45. Then I have some guys who go to 70, some guys who go to 90. And I had 4 guys who tried the 135. So yes, so that we end up with all the sleds start with 45s on them. And then usually we try to progress so that, okay, we'll throw a 25 on, and those guys who are using 70 will be paired up, and then we'll throw a couple of 45s on 2 other sleds, and the guys that can go to 90 are paired up. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but not awful. So it's a little bit time consuming, but I think it has value.
Very cool. I want to stay along this line, a thread you were a part of on Twitter with Coach Carmen Bott. She said, in speed development for team sport athletes, it's not about, when you're working with team sport athletes, it's not about becoming Mr. Fix It. It's a fine line between teaching good enough mechanics and making them in their body neurotic. So always keep in mind they have to read, react, and use implements. So let's just talk. Your response was, and even if they are perfect mechanics, they are rarely useful in addition to holding a stick or carrying a ball, changes things. We do very little running form work, but lots of times sprints. Coach, how much, I want to stay on this idea of, I would think that some of the resisted sprinting, sometimes when you pick up weight, that cleans up form. How much is that, is the form getting cleaned up sometimes with some of this? Not the 135, but when you have the right weight, is it helping with that form?
I think it's helping. I think just timing sometimes helps. I think that timing allows people to experiment with, okay, longer strides, harder pushes, whatever it is, because you get that immediate feedback. You look at it and think, okay, that worked better, so therefore that is good. And that's kind of what we're shooting for versus, that's why I think Carmen's expression was perfect. You'll get some people that will be neurotic in terms of, oh, what's my arm angle? How am I supposed to hold my hand? Should I have a fist? Should I have my hand open? Should I be at 90? Should I be, should my hand touch my hip? Should I go to my chin? All these things. When in reality, you sort of turn the game on and the running back has a ball in his hand, right? So he's not moving his hand in the same way that he would. He's not moving both hands the same way that he would. If we look at the hockey game, you've got a right-handed guy. He's got the stick in his hand, and he's moving that stick across his body. We're seeing that in field hockey. We're seeing in lacrosse an opposite, a rotary body action coming across your body and/or a kind of forward-backward kind of action. So I think what happens a lot of the time, and this is just strength and conditioning in a nutshell, is that we kind of look at one group of people that do something well. Let's just say in this particular situation, track sprinters. And then we think, okay, I'm going to copy how they do everything. And what I think we want to do in the bigger picture is think, okay, how do they train? And are there things from their training that can be beneficial for us? We've gone in the ultra simplistic world. Well, how do these guys train? Well, they run fast a lot. Okay, I think we'll borrow some of that. We're going to run fast a lot. And then you think, oh, but they have 2 hours, 5 days a week to practice track. We have maybe 10 minutes, 2 days a week to practice speed. And so then you start to realize, okay, yes, there's some things that we can draw from that are going to be helpful. But if we become completely imitative, then we get paralyzed. And I think that's happened. I've seen it with Olympic lifting. People, all of a sudden, somebody's doing an hour and 45-minute Olympic lifting workout, and they're doing clean pulls and snatch pulls and front squats and back squats and jerks. And you think, wait a second, we just thought that cleans and snatches might be beneficial from a power development standpoint. We don't have to do the entire Olympic lifting workout. That wasn't really the idea. And I think that happens with the West Side guys. Oh, now we're going to do 2-board press and 3-board press, and we're going to do dynamic effort, and we're going to do this. And it's kind of like, no. Let's look at what the West Side guys are doing and say, okay, is there something there that can help me from a strength perspective? Let's look at the Olympic lifting people. Is there something there that can help me from a power perspective? Let's look at the sprinters and say, hey, is there something there that can help me from a speed development perspective? But realizing that at no point is there some need for us to copy exactly what that person is doing.
Absolutely. And do you feel like it's similar to medicine balls? Like, I always feel like, because, obviously I work with older people most of the time, and sometimes they're a little uncoordinated, but I just kind of keep my mouth shut. I show them a slam, for example, or a chest pass. And the first couple might be crappy, and when you use the right coaching language, like, break the ball, throw it through the wall, right? It seems like now they just kind of figured out the body 90% of the time. Obviously, there's some outliers who were like, oh boy, motor morons, but I feel like with a medicine ball, a lot of people will figure out, they'll have a good sequence. I'll say, get on your tippy toes. They'll have some good triple extension over their head. They're slamming the ball. It's loud. They're going. Does it work like that a little bit with some of the sprinting too over time? Like, where you feel like, yeah, we're sprinting a lot. My guys are cleaning up their form as they get more experience.
Absolutely. It's the self-organization idea. And it goes back. I always use that bicycle analogy that we've said 20 times on the podcast, I bet, from oh my God, what's the education book? Most Likely to Succeed, where they talk about learning to ride a bike. You learn to ride a bike. Your parents put you on a bike, and then they pushed you, right? And you went rolling away on the bike, and sometimes you fell off and you got back on, and then somebody got you back on, and they ran next to you and they pushed you, and you figured out how to turn the pedals. And the more you got on it and did it, eventually you were pushing yourself and turning the pedals. Everything from a learning perspective, I think, is very similar to that, in terms of it is an experiential process that the person will get better at via the experience. And I think we give ourselves too much credit as coaches sometimes, in terms of we probably disrupt things more than anything with our feedback. That's why we tell our coaches all the time things like, if you're talking for more than 20 seconds, you've talked way too long. The John Wooden idea: show them, do this, not this, give them good demonstrations, engage their visual system, all of these things. Even in bike riding, in Europe, they've learned to ride scooter bikes, so all they have to worry about is balance, not pedaling. And it's such a smart idea. You watch the European kids, and they just are kind of scooting along. They're sitting on the seat and they're bouncing, but they're not even worried about the pedals yet. And when we get back, I remember one year we get back from Germany, I said to everybody, oh my God, everybody should get their kids scooter bikes. We're such idiots, because again, what do? We go to the most advanced thing, right? The bike is,
yeah.
Instead of just thinking, hey, just put them on something that has two wheels and rolls, and all they got to worry about is balance. They can put their feet down. It's so much smarter. And I just think we fight back against smarter a lot in everything, but in strength and conditioning particularly, because one thing that we never want to do is we never want to admit that anybody's smarter than us. We never want to admit that anybody's a better coach than us. We never want to admit that anybody knows more than we do. It's such, and I say this a lot, but it's such an ego-driven field that it holds itself back because of the ego.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of examples from Instagram that I've been seeing that I'm like, where is that person going with this stuff? Used to be a leader, and they're just making a fool of themselves now, but we'll talk about that.
I had an argument on Twitter on that the other day about throwing barbell, throwing and catching the barbell in the bench press. And I'm just thinking, I can't believe I'm having this argument with another intelligent coach, because And then somebody said, well, it's only the elite of the elite that are going to do it. And I'm like, I would, I train the elite of the elite. So don't tell me that that's who is doing it, because it's not. I've never seen the elite of the elite doing it. And it's really interesting to to just see like the ego component, people really digging their heels in and really struggling sometimes. And you just want to look at things and think, I always think when somebody smart disagrees with me, the first thing that goes through my mind is, why? What am I missing? Because if I was thinking of someone like Anthony, Anthony's a pretty smart guy. He doesn't think I'm right about this. What am I missing? Why would he be so vigorously against the thought that I'm having? And that should make you go back and examine. But in our field, it doesn't. It makes people dig their heels in and get defensive. And then they want to argue with you. I think you should always go back and say, there's always that possibility. Hey, am I wrong? That's a real, I always go back to the Fonz, right? People just can't do it. They can't, the idea that I might not be the best coach out there is too much.
I feel like we're seeing a little bit of this idea, this hatred with like a Huberman, Peter Attia. I know you just recommended, I was listening to it as well, the Centurion Olympics. I haven't listened to the book yet. I did get it right when it came out, but I still haven't listened to it. But I feel like, all right, Peter has his standards, right, for those things. And it's based off of his practice. It's based off of a certain goal, whether that farmers carry for a minute or whatever, right? But people dig in and they get so angry at that stuff. And like I saw somebody, oh, I'm training for longevity, like making fun of it. Yeah. And it's kind of like, and they're just trying to discredit these guys, like, oh, they're scientists. So Peter Attia was like, he's a doctor. He's also an athlete. He was like he was a boxer. He was a cyclist. He trains, he explores, he researches, and he works with people and patients. So, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Some of the stuff might not be for you, but if you go listen to him in that podcast, like you're going to go over that list, see what's important to you. Here's some things that you might want to get ahead to last a little bit longer.
Yeah, and my whole thing with both with Attia and you, but I'm not going to say either one of them is perfect, because I don't think they are. I don't think their thought process is perfect. I will say they've probably done more, the two of them collectively, for health and wellness in the last 2 years than maybe anybody in our field.
I agree 100%.
Brought way more people to this exercise is medicine idea. Attia hammers it in terms of, he'd be the first guy to tell you want to live longer, get stronger, raise your VO2 max. Okay. Pretty simple. And Huberman, same way. And again, yes, do they inject their own personal experiences into it? Maybe a little too much? Yes. But if you're looking at the big picture, if you're in the business, like for me, I'm in the business of fitness, right? I have a fitness business where we train people. They're doing a huge service for my business, because they are telling every person, hey, become Mike's customer, right? Go to Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, because they're going to make you condition and lift weights, and that's going to be really good for you. And then I look at it and think, and by the way, we're really good at this. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for a really long time. We've been doing it for your age bracket. It's so good for the field that I can't understand why anybody reacts negatively to it, except for, we go back to what we talked about, right? It goes back to ego and jealousy and wanting to be the smartest person in the room. And that is the fatal flaw of our field.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100% on the stuff. They've done so much. And I think they're speaking to you and I, but they're also, the average person can understand what they're talking about. And we could take those principles and put them in our practice at maybe at a more advanced level.
I started doing I'm like, I got to get back doing carries again. And I got to get back doing my zone 2 stuff. I've been doing mental work. I haven't been doing carries. One of my knees was sore, and I'm like, it's not so sore that I can't walk with with weight. And then I think,
Yeah.
I'm probably going too light because I'm really not. I'm not at. I'm at 50% of my body weight, but I'm not at 75. So it's
Yeah.
really good stuff.
Yeah. He should have you on the show. He was wanted to say, you're talking about the bucket idea, buddy. You're talking, right? Because he was like, when he was trying to tell.
That's one of my goals. I want to get on that podcast. I want to, and I don't think people like me are on his radar, truthfully.
Yeah.
And
I don't know about that.
eventually, at some point, I will be on his radar. I will say, I just sent, so Beth Lewis, who's the woman that he talks about all the time, who kind of taught him about proper strength training and about core training and about all these things. I just sent her my book intentionally because I'm hoping that she'll read the book and think, wow, maybe Mike would be a great guest for Peter, and she'd be somebody that could push that over the line potentially.
Here's how you're going to get on. You're going to, you have Ben Bruno's wedding next weekend. He knows Huberman. And you will ask Ben to tell Huberman to tell Peter Attia, this guy would be a good guest. That's how we do it.
Okay.
That's how you do it. Ben Bruno is going to get you on there. Coach, I have one more thing for you really quick. I have, Kevin Neeld on, so it's hockey month here on the Strength Coach Podcast. Maddie Nickel next month, but we're going to talk about off season. Give us just like an overview. If your advice to coaches, because we were talking with Kevin about, obviously he's not going to be able to train all of his players. You do have people come in who are in the NHL, who work with other strength coaches, but they're going to do your program. What is your goal with off season? What are you really trying to do? I know there's obviously people are going to be different, but in general, what would be your advice to coaches, private sector coaches, about the off season and working with players?
I always go back, first do no harm, right? Get them healthy again, figure out, what am I dealing with? What did they play in every game? If they didn't, what were their problems? What are the things that I have to worry about? Reestablish their strength. I think one of the things that you see with your NHL player, and probably with all your professional athletes, is that they're losing strength year over year because the season is way too long and the off season is way too short. So we're going to really try to get them healthy. We're going to try to get their strength back. We're going to try to bring their conditioning back up. So for us, we just did kind of our first 2-mile air dine. Let's get a little check in and see our guys where they supposed to be, where they should be from a conditioning standpoint. So I think it's kind of simple down the middle. Again, everybody accuses me, and that if you saw the Twitter thing, the guy posted, I've got the safest weight room ever, and he posted this big empty room. And it's like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. But there's a lot less Olympic lifting going on. Those guys, there's no front squats. I think probably, heavy bench press, heavy deadlift. Yeah. But trap bar jumps, plyos, but just gradually get them back to the point where they're ready to go back to camp again, particularly with your NHL guy. Maybe your AHL guy is a little bit different in terms of he's got to have a little bit more edge. But the guy who's an established NHL player, it's like, let's see if we can get back to the baseline and maybe a little bit above the baseline.
Mike, do you take into consideration, I know you work with Jimmy VC, and Jimmy's kind of been at he's had some great seasons where people counted him out and he's come back and really done a great job. Do you take into account sometimes when they don't have the contract, or they kind of, okay, we got to get this guy even, he's going to want it. Are they kind of go to a little gung-ho? You got to pull him back. What's that situation like with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with Jimmy, was there a little more urgency a year ago when he didn't have a contract? Yes. Does he know it? Do we know it? Yes. You want to avoid overreacting to that, I think, because it goes back to the same idea. It's the farm analogy, the lawn analogy. Like, it takes time, right? You can't think, oh, I gotta cram 12 weeks of training into 8 weeks, because I can't really do that. So you've got to be patient, but conscious of the fact that the situations are maybe different.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Coach, we will let you go on that note. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Welcome to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment. My name is Sumit Seth, and I'm the co-founder of Naamly. I often get asked on the one thing to focus on as it pertains to bettering one's member experience. And if I really had to sum it up, the one crucial aspect to focus on would be to put yourself in the client's shoes and walk the path as if you were them. To delve deeper into understanding your client's perspective, let's dive into the magical world of acronyms. Well, only two. Powerful one, though, that are bound to transform your member experience. First up, we have Ford. No, not the American car company. Although, wouldn't it be great if they started making gym equipment too? Their slogan, after all, is built to last or something. Okay, I digress. The F in Ford stands for feelings and fears, and it prompts you to consider the emotions and concerns your clients might have. O stands for objectives or goals, and it involves understanding what they hope to achieve. R refers to recognition and responsibility. It helps you to gain an understanding of how they like to be acknowledged on their accomplishments and the support they may need to help with their progress. Finally, D is for dreams. It encourages you to explore how you can help them reach their aspirational level. Ford really helps you to create a supercharged roadmap that will help you to connect with your clients on the deeper level. I mean, we get this right, we can then truly knock their socks off, unless your gym has a no-shoe policy. Well, they still may be wearing socks, though. But wait, there's more. Introducing F.O.R.M, my very own creation. Just like how my trainer used to hound me about my form during my workouts, F.O.R.M in the context of member experience focuses on getting to know your clients as if they were your long-lost gym buddies. F is for family, because let's face it, we want to know not just about this specimen, but the whole pod that this particular specimen comes from. O is for occupation, where we uncover their work, the stress, demands, and professional aspirations. R is for recreation, because we want to know about those hobbies and activities that fulfill our clients. And M, my friends, is for motivation, the driving force behind those bicep curls, those early morning gym visits, and those attempts to conquer the kettlebell swings. Discover what truly lights their fitness fire and be the motivational spark they need. By incorporating the dynamic duo of F.O.R.D and F.O.R.M, you become the superhero of member experiences, understanding their fears, supporting their goals, and guiding them towards a future that's brighter than the neon lights that my buddy Frank Nash has in his gyms. So buckle up your gym shoes and get ready to rock their fitness world with laughter, insights, and personal connections. Till next time, this is Sumit Seth, co-founder of Naamly. For more info, please check out Naamly.com and schedule a free demo to discover how we can help you capture your findings from these two acronyms so they can be used by all your training team to help your members in their journey.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by AG1 by Athletic Greens. 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. Actually, just had one. Kind of got off work, and I'm a little tired, so I stopped using it in the morning. I'm using it kind of when as a pre-workout or when I feel like I need a little energy. And they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/strength coach. All right. Keeping with our little hockey theme here, we got some more coming up soon. I have Kevin Neeld on today. Kevin's currently the head performance coach for the Boston Bruins. He oversees all the aspects of designing and implementing the team's performance training program, as well as monitoring the players' performance, workload, recovery. Before that, he was with the San Jose Sharks. We had Mike Potenza on last episode, his old boss. And Mike obviously now is with the Golden State Warriors. So, and before that, he was at Endeavor Sports Performance. That's when I first met Kevin down in Jersey. And he's also worked with the USA Women's Olympic Hockey Team. He's got his PhD. as well in human and sport performance from Rocky Mountain University. So has a couple books out, speaks a lot all over the place. So Kev, thanks for doing this, bud.
Yeah, of course, Sam. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Hey, first of all, congratulations on an amazing season. I was trying to throw you off a little bit. I got my Matt Sundin Toronto Maple Leafs hat. I got my Islander shirt on. You know, I tried. You know, hockey players, we like to chirp a little bit, and this is my little silent chirping. Although I just threw it out there. But what a great season you had, even for me as an Islander fan. Obviously, I'm always rooting for you. But just looked like so much fun. You guys were, I mean, you broke all these records and you guys were killing it. Just talk a little bit about the regular season first, and you know how much fun that must have been, and you know, just kind of being part of that.
Yeah, I think the only thing you're missing is maybe an Indiana Ice T-shirt. There, we'll have to get you looped in with the local hockey programs. But yeah, it was a fun year. I mean, obviously we had a historic regular season from total points and total wins in the season standpoint. And, you know, I think that those things obviously are nice accomplishments, but more a reflection, I think, on just our group's mentality of coming into work every day and not playing to your record, of trying to put your best foot forward, stick to the habits that put you in a position to win a single game, and just repeat those consistently throughout the year. And you know, I think the general thought is that if you do the right things consistently, that you're going to end up on the right side of the score sheet more often than not. So you know, that part was really fun. And you know, obviously you don't win that many games without having a lot of exceptionally talented players. And you know, I think the combination of skill and just knowledge of the game, in concert with the things I just mentioned, with the attention to details and the commitment to the process, and that's from a practice habit standpoint to a off-ice preparation and lifestyle standpoint. I think that just made it a really fun year to be a part of.
Yeah, and kind of reflecting on last episode with Sean, with Mike Potenza, you know, one of the things when we look at the Bruins, Claude Mew once said, if you want to win the Stanley Cup, you need it's the 1/3 formula. 1/3 some veterans, 1/3 guys in their prime, 1/3 kind of those really hungry rookies. And with you guys, a lot of your veterans had amazing years, first of all. But you know, it's your job to kind of make sure you're keeping them healthy. But it's got to be nice to work with some of those older guys, Bergeron and Marchand and et cetera, just because, like Mike was talking about, like Sean was talking about, the captains and those older guys set the example. Just talk about that piece of it, because you got to really, you got to balance that piece of it throughout the season with these the older guys and the younger guys.
Yeah, I know Sean mentioned Paul Kariya and Scott Niedermayer and some of the guys that he was fortunate to work with. Obviously, with San Jose, we had Pavelski and Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau and Brent Burns, and there was a really great group of veteran leaders in that room as well. And you know, for us, I mean, we have a half dozen guys that I think fall into that category, several of which you just named. Some have since moved on from the organization. And you know, I think what those guys do is, among many other things, is they serve as excuse eliminators. You know, if you have Patrice Bergeron that's showing up an hour before he's on the ice and he's spending extra time foam rolling and going through specific mobility or, you know, hip core work that he's doing as a, you know, kind of proactive, preventative effort, and then he's training and he's doing everything with maximum effort and maximum intent, and he's asking questions on, you know, what extra stuff he can do so that he feels better heading into the next day. Then, you know, if you're the 21-year-old kid that's stepping into the organization for the first time and you're used to rolling out of bed at 9:30 or 10 and you're a little sleepy in the morning, like you don't have an excuse anymore to not show up on time and to not give your best effort. And you know, I had a conversation with Zdeno Chara several years back that when he first came to the organization, you know, he viewed it as a personal goal and responsibility to instill kind of a blue collar work ethic, and the strength and conditioning and off ice training side of that was really important. And so he was telling me about one of his first training camps where it was really important to him that he did more pull-ups than everybody else. And I think that, it's just one example of, anybody that's worked with anybody in a gym setting and done pull-ups, it's like, all right, the long arm excuse comes up, or the I'm too heavy excuse comes up. So, you have the 6'9" guy that's, somewhere north of 250 and he's doing the most pull-ups. It's an excuse eliminator. So, I think our program and our efforts from a, performance standpoint have really benefited a lot from having guys that have been around for a while and have had a lot of success on the ice, really not just buying in, but committing to that side of preparation in general. And that has set a really good example for everybody else in the organization, and a really good standard that, we aim to hold everybody accountable to.
Yeah, I love it. I think I was talking to Mike about it. Was I saw it with a couple hockey players that I trained, and I think the lesson here is kind of try to grab those leaders, even if you're just a strength coach working in the private sector, right? And you're not seeing them on the ice, but the guys who are leaders, even in the room, in the gym, grab them and try to make them understand that role even more when they're young, right? If they don't understand, like, hey, these guys are watching you. You're a leader in here. And I know with one of the kids, two of the kids, Dante and Michael Emerson. Actually, Michael just got drafted by Carolina in the 6th round. They just what they were doing out there. It was like this ripple effect with the other guys. So for me, I was thinking, man, that's what you got to do. You got to grab on to a couple of these guys and really like make them understand the importance of their role in that gym.
Yeah, I think in the case of the guys at Boston that I walked into a group that understood that, and took a lot of pride in fulfilling that role. But even when I was back in Endeavor and in the private sector, there's still people that fill that role that, if somebody's having a bad day, might, go up and put their arm around them and just talk them through some things. Or if there's somebody that's new, they'll walk up and introduce themselves and just start to make people feel comfortable in that environment, or give them a little push when they need it. Or, if people are slacking off in your training group, that they might throw a comment their way to just help get things back on track. And you need that. I think, culture is it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And, ultimately it's a standard of behaviors of the group that is not just committed to by the group, but also upheld by the group. So you need everybody on the same page, and you need multiple voices that are pulling in the right direction. And, we had a lot of great guys at Endeavor too, but one guy that really stands out is a kid named Kyle Criscolo that played at Harvard for several years. He was the first 2-time captain in Harvard, I think since 1924. He's still playing in the AHL. And, Kyle was a guy, he's back then, maybe 5'7", 5'8", 160 pounds. He wasn't the biggest guy in the room, but was strong, was fast, and just worked as hard as he possibly could every day. And, he just had that character about him that made other people want to do the same thing. And, I think that he's been rewarded for that throughout his career, but he also made my job a lot easier in that setting too. So certainly appreciate having guys like that around.
Yeah, absolutely. Kev, the only upside, obviously, you guys lost in the 1st round. There's, obviously it was kind of devastating. And I don't think anybody thought that was going to happen. I know I had my DraftKings on in there. I put in January. I had Bruins to take it. But the upside is maybe some less injuries. Maybe, there's obviously more time to recover, more time to kind of regroup and for that off season. So can you just go over like a timeline of like what does this look like from early May to the start of training camp for you? Like maybe what are the primary goals? What is your thought process going in, and maybe whoever you collaborate with on what direction you guys want to go? Is it an after action review first? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I think, and the as soon as the season ends, and whether that's, the last regular season game, whether that's the first round of the playoffs, whether it's the Stanley Cup final, you just immediately start looking forward to how do we start to prepare for next year. And that preparation process obviously involves allowing some time for players to physically and mentally recover from the previous season. Sometimes that involves surgeries for some players. Sometimes it's a little bit more, just passive rest to allow some aches and pains to heal. Sometimes it's allowing guys some space to get away, go on a trip, and just recalibrate, focus on something else other than hockey after going to the rink every day for the previous 8 months. And but our perspective is really immediately transitions into how do we start preparing for the next year. And for us, we have players obviously that span a pretty large age range and a pretty large life situation continuum, as far as we have guys that have multiple kids that are still in school when the season ends. So even if they're gonna go back to home for them, if they're going to Canada or Sweden or wherever the case may be, they may be in Boston for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks after the season before they get to go home. We have other guys that maybe have babies on the way, so they're kind of in place until the child is born, and then there's a period of time after that before they can travel. And then the younger guys that don't have as many of those limitations typically, but as a result of that, there's a pretty large bandwidth of how the offseason is handled on a player to player basis. So, we had 1 week after the season ended, we had two guys that started their offseason program. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, we probably had another 7 join them. So, within the first 3 weeks, I think traditionally you might think that's just time off and guys are on vacation or just staying away from the rink. But we had a little over a third of our roster in the building training that early. And a lot of those were players that had kids in school that, were going to just get right into it, keep routines going and start the offseason process, knowing that when the kids are all out of school, they might have a family trip planned in the middle of the summer where they're going to take some time off scattered throughout, opposed to kind of front loading it and then training straight through for the rest of the offseason. So we try to learn as much about what the needs are of the player, both in terms of some of the things we talked about, but then also the schedule, and then filter that back then through like what are our goals, where's the player at in their career, how important is it for them to make significant strides in certain areas or in several areas throughout the off season. And then we just reverse engineer, we know when training camp is roughly, and then we know how much time we might have, and we start to develop our programs that way. And with our off-season program, we generally have 5 different tracks that a player may fall into that, kind of range from, more of a speed emphasis to more of a strength emphasis to more of a conditioning emphasis, and a couple kind of hybrid programs in between there. But those tend to be the 3 primary goals that people have. They either need to get bigger and stronger, they need to get faster, or they need to be in better shape, typically also while also needing to get faster or also needing to get stronger. So we develop our tracks there, and then we will, add phases or build in more work or, kind of manipulate what the exact duration of the offseason program looks like based on the individual needs. And then we just kind of do a final pass through from an exercise selection standpoint and make sure that if guys have specific injuries or, known prominent mobility restrictions or movement limitations, that we're accounting for those in the program as well. So, we have 23 players at any given time on the active roster, and I don't know that we have 23 completely unique programs, but probably pretty close to it when it's all said and done.
How many guys, like percentage wise or number wise, are kind of saying, "Hey, Kev, I'm going back to Ottawa. I got my trainer there. I'm going to work with him." But or is there anybody that's kind of off the program and you're just like, "Cool, I trust that guy. You know who it is. great. Like, let's say they're going to Fitzy up in Canada, or Scott Livingston or whatever. Some guys that you would trust, Matty Nickel, right? Whatever. Is there any group of guys that have that?
Yeah, I think the majority of players will go back somewhere and then have somebody that they work with back at home. So, a lot of the guys that you just mentioned are guys that we've been fortunate to have players that work with them in the off season. And again, there's probably some differences in exactly how you might set up a program or kind of design things on a day-to-day basis, but there's a commonality, I think, in the overarching philosophy. I think there's, obviously, from my perspective, a lot of respect for those guys specifically in their knowledge of what it takes to be successful at the professional level, and they understand the schedule and the balance of pushing physical development with making sure that players are durable enough to sustain a professional season. So, I think it's difficult and it changes every year as far as like what percentage of the team are actually following our off-season program and what percentage is not. But I think everybody has an understanding of the expectation and the standard when they arrive at training camp. And then, from there, as long as you're healthy and you're coming back prepared, then, if you have somebody at home that you've worked with in the past that you feel comfortable with, I don't have any issue with that at all. I think it's more just show up ready if you're gonna use your own person. And there are some cases where people have somebody that they maybe have used since they were a kid or in high school, juniors, whatever, that they enjoy spending time with and have worked with them before, and obviously now they're at this stage, so there's some level of confidence that they've had success in that program. And then it comes to light, whether it's over a single season or over several consecutive seasons, that whatever they're doing in the off season is not sufficient to prepare them for what we're asking of them. And then there's a different conversation. And, sometimes that leads to, players adopting our program into, whatever environment they're training at. So that may mean the player stays with the same coach, but they're doing our program instead of whatever program the facility was running. Sometimes that means switching facilities. And, there are times where we can help be a resource and a liaison to help, introduce that player to other really great people in the area. Obviously some of the guys that you just mentioned in Canada, there tend to be some pretty good hockey specialists up north of the border. So
Yeah.
it really is kind of on a case by case basis, but I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everybody's coming in ready.
Yeah, as long as Boyle's probably ruined some of your guys, so you don't want to send them over there.
No, we have we seem to be accumulating players that either played in one of the Boston colleges or universities or grew up locally. So we've benefited from Mike's tutelage certainly over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I figured. I saw Shattenkirk just signed with you guys, and he was a BU kid, and obviously he's gonna have a lot of the similar philosophies down. So, and that's always helpful. So, Kev, I'm pretty sure this is unique to hockey. Maybe basketball does more of a D league, right? But NHL has a development camp. Can you just give us an idea of who attends this? What's the goal of that? And is there really anything as a strength coach in the private sector that maybe we can learn from that type of situation, like a short-term development camp? What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, so hockey, their draft process is unique compared to other sports in that the draft year for most players is around when they're 18. So you have some guys that are about to turn 19. You have some players that are 17 that'll turn 18 in the few weeks after the combine and the draft. But essentially, it's all 18-year-old kids. But most of those kids will not play in professional hockey for 3 to 5 years afterwards. So, in the NFL, you're drafting players at a certain stage of their collegiate development where they are prepared then to immediately transition into professional football. In hockey, you're drafting guys that you're hoping in 3 to 5 years will have developed to a point that they're ready to transition into a professional organization. So the development camp is really an opportunity to get your draft picks from typically the last 3 to 4 drafts together so that they can meet each other. They can learn about the organization. They can start to develop a little bit of a rapport and comfort level with the organization, with the coaches, with the staff, with the other players there, so that when that time comes, when they sign a entry level contract, whether that's joining our minor league team in Providence, or if they're at a point where they earn an opportunity to play in Boston, that everything that they encounter, they're not seeing for the first time. So every organization handles their development camps a little bit differently, but I think the goal for us is really to expose them to the habits and the expectations of what it means to play at the professional level. So, from a performance standpoint, we do go through a basic testing process, which puts a dot on the map for us in the middle of the summer, recognizing that a certain percentage of those players may be at training camp in 6 weeks afterwards at the start of the season. So you have an opportunity there. If a player has a major limitation, or if there's something that they really need to improve on, you have an opportunity with enough of a runway that they can make some real progress to have that conversation and make them aware of the importance of making progress in a certain area. But you also then have a year over year opportunity to just track a player's physical development, which can be pretty helpful. So there's a little bit of a testing component. There's we'll train and go through a kind of pre-skate or pre-training preparation process every day. And again, the purpose of that is twofold. One, it's to make sure that obviously they're prepared to our organization does skate every day too, so to make sure that they're ready to skate and minimize the risk of any injuries that may pop up unnecessarily. But it's really probably more so to just expose them to our process and give us an opportunity to watch how all the kids move and to coach them through certain movements. And, again, just get a sense of what areas we may be able to help them with when they're not with us, so that if there's an opportunity for them to make their transition, that they aren't running up against a barrier that is something that could have been addressed in the years previous to them signing. So from a training standpoint, that's really the goal. It's exposure and then an opportunity for us to coach. We also this year integrated kind of these mini presentations from our department every day. So we take 10 to 15 minutes and just take a topic and just try to share some of the big rocks in things like sleep, in-season training, recovery, pre-practice preparation, and just try to explain why those things are important, the impact that it's going to have on their performance, and then how to go about it, how to recognize if you're doing a good job, or how to troubleshoot a situation if you're having trouble in one of those areas. And I think again, the idea there is there's so much, Ant, that goes into why a player may be successful at the professional level. And obviously the guys that make it have a really special level of talent, but holding that aside, there's a lot of really talented guys that don't make it. And some of it is the commitment to the practice habits. Some of it is willingness to change and adapt to roles as the situation calls for it. Some of it is the off ice and lifestyle habits, whether that's from a training standpoint or whether it's more from a sleep, nutrition, hydration standpoint, where you just have this inability to be consistent in your performance on a day-to-day basis that makes it really challenging for certain players, even with high skill levels, to stay at the professional level. So, I think it's probably maybe analogous to growing up as a kid. Like you hear your parents say, you should eat your vegetables or go to sleep early or drink your water. And, the players don't want to hear it, but if they get it from, if an NHL player goes on a TV show and says, it's really important for you to go to sleep early and drink water and eat your vegetables, then that might resonate for whatever reason more with the player than hearing that message from a different source. So for us, it's just recognizing some of those really basic but impactful lifestyle habits that are really important for not just achieving success at the professional level, but sustaining it over time and trying to impart the importance of those things to the players at a young age. So I think having worked in the private sector, it's a challenging time of year to navigate because you want the players to be ready and to show well in the testing at these development camps. But you also know that, some players, and this is where the scheduling of hockey is pretty unique too. We have some guys that, played their last game a couple weeks before they show up to development camp. We have other guys that haven't played a game in 3-4 months. So, the stage that they're at in their offseason program, where they're at in maybe their offseason skating progression, it's all different. So, if when you have that player in the private sector, you know that you have a plan for them and you're at some stage of the progression of that plan. And then for a week, and then for typically a half week or so on the back end, it's interrupted to allow the players to, maybe deload from your training to prepare well to test at this camp and then to recover on the back end from it. So, we try to be cognizant of all of that and make sure that we're still providing a training stimulus while the players are at the camp. So it's not a lost week from that standpoint, but, also recognizing that most players aren't skating 5 days a week at that stage of the summer. So, we just have to be cognizant of the increase in the on ice load at that point too.
Yeah, Kev, in terms of staying on this idea with all the kids in that development stage, I know, like, for example, to go back to Michael, he played 2 years with Chicago Steel and now he's going to college, right? So he's got another 4 years. So we're looking at 6 years, so 4 years from when he was drafted. How much because this would be insane. You have Providence, first of all, guys who are at Providence, and you have all of these picks that might be in Europe and all over Canada at either junior or college in America. What is there? At what level are you checking in with them, giving them programs? I mean, is there anything else that you're doing post development camp with them?
Yeah, there's pretty consistent regular follow up with all the players that are in our prospect pool. And, a lot of that is just to provide a continuous opportunity for the player to share a way that we can help them in their process. So,
Yeah.
a player might think like, I'm all set. I have I have a really good strength and conditioning coach with our team. We have a good, consistent in-season training process. I feel confident in my nutrition, whatever the case is. And then they get into the season, they might hit a patch where their energy isn't good. So then, the check-ins, there's an opportunity for us to, maybe refer them to our nutritionist or to talk through some different recovery strategies with them that may help them get through that stretch of their season. So, I think obviously we're not there, so we can, hold their hand through the entire process while they're with their other team. And, a lot of players, especially the players that are in US college programs, they have really good resources available to them. So, from our perspective, it's trying to learn where our resources are most needed and then to help fill those gaps for the players that need it the most. And, that may mean sending, in-season programs for players that don't have access to good things. It may mean, players have a couple things set up with their team and they're checking a few boxes really effectively, but there are some other areas that we feel are really important that they're not addressing. So, how can we fill in some gaps from a programming standpoint in that regard? But really, and it's just making sure that the player is aware that, these things are important and you're given a certain level of resources from your organization and we're here to help. So, don't feel like you're imposing on us, or don't forget to reach out and that you have us as a resource to, help fill in those gaps. Because we have had situations where, players are at a stage in their development where they're ready to transition into a professional organization and they aren't physically ready. And to me, that's a failure of their development process. And, a lot of times it comes back to players are having success at the level that they're playing at. So it's easy to justify whatever their routines and habits are at that level. And then when they reach the next level, they're obviously playing against a higher level of competition. They're playing against men instead of, kids that are in their relative age group, and it's not enough. So, we're trying to get ahead of some of those situations so that, again, we're just minimizing barriers to entry for the players when they, are at a point where they sign with the organization. But typically, I think after you're drafted, you have 3 years to sign an entry level contract. So, the example you gave, like the players that go to college, typically they will sign after their junior year, if not ahead of time. Hockey's kind of unique in that regard too, that if you go back to college for your 4th year, if you were drafted before you go in, then you become a free agent at the end of that season. You can sign with anybody you want. The organization essentially loses your rights at that point. So, it's interesting in just how different it is from other sports. Obviously, we just went through, before the draft a few weeks back, we had the combine, and every year there's a bunch of people that that build this argument of, this doesn't matter, none of this, look, this guy was a top 10 pick and he can't do a pull-up, or whatever the case is. And I think, even in the NFL, you see players every year that have unbelievable performances in one or more of the combine tests that aren't good football players. But in that environment, you're getting players that are relatively the same age, that are ready to transition immediately into professional football, that have had a pretty consistent span between when their season ended and when the NFL combine is. So there's a relatively similar offseason across the group. In hockey, it's not like that at all. So you really have to understand the context that some of the off-ice testing is falling within. Is we have, one of the pieces of data that comes through with the combine testing is that it has days since last game before they arrive at the combine. And every year there's players there that have less than 5. And every year there's players there that have more than 100. So, when you're looking at their information, you can't really say, well, this guy did 10 pull-ups and this guy did 8. So, the guy that did 10 is stronger, because that guy may have been 3 months into his offseason program and the other guy might have played a game the week before. So some unique challenges certainly in the sport, but it makes it fun.
Yeah. Speaking of unique challenges, go back to last episode. I was talking to Coach Boyle and, Sean Skane about this idea about when athletes lift, right? When should track athletes lift, which we turned it into when athletes should lift. And we really turned it into, really for us, it was, for the most part, lacrosse and hockey. And, again, we had Sean on, and I was able to witness Sean, working with the Ducks after a game one time. It was a 15-minute workout. This is a unique schedule. I know coaches can play a role in it too. We talked about his two of his coaches over time, Bruce Boudreau and Randy Carlisle, completely different styles. Randy is, kind of more of a stickler every day. Bruce would give days off. So where do you stand on that issue of being able to, lift before practice or lifting after practice, or, a couple hours before? How does that work? This whole thing work for you?
Yeah, I think our in-season program, we generally try to rotate through training sessions that have either a speed, a power, or more of a strength emphasis. And depending on what the goal of that specific session is, that will influence the optimal timing for that day. So, if our goal is to just hit, a quick strength day throughout the season, then post game becomes a really reasonable time to impart that stress. And we have, from the start of training camp through the end of the season, and I can probably count on one hand the number of days that somebody isn't training, whether that's, injured guys that are there when the team has off days, but pretty much throughout the week, every day that we're at the rink, somebody's doing something. And that's, there's the schedule, even if you say, we really want players to do strength work after games, or we only want players to train on practice days, the schedule imposes a pretty significant reality on any ideals that you have going into it. And, for example, our schedule at the end of last season, for the last 6 weeks, we played every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So we had a 3 and 4 basically every week for the last 6 weeks of the season. There was one exception. I think week 5, we did not have the Tuesday game, but then we kept right on with the rest of that schedule. So, in between those, knowing that it also was the last 6 weeks of the season, where there's some cumulative fatigue issues. You're going through just a horrific patch of stress from the schedule. Some of those back-to-back games are home aways. You have flights. You have, days where you're walking into a hotel room at 4 a.m. in the morning. There aren't a lot of opportunities for showing up to a training session well rested, or showing up to a practice for that matter well rested. So, you have to find those opportunities to keep a training stimulus present, and it's not always ideal. But I think what we've tried to do is, on days where we're prioritizing speed or power development, we try to do that on a practice day. And we typically will try to do any higher speed or higher threshold work before practice. And then, what that may equate to in our training session is maybe the first block or two we want everybody to do before, and then the last block they can do after practice if we run up into any time constraints ahead of time. And I think, depending on how coaches are designing their training programs, for us, our in-season training, the total volume of work is so low for any given training session that the overwhelming majority of the time, players feel better after going through the training session than they do walking into the building that day. So it's more stimulative, and it more sets them up to have a better practice the majority of the time. So, that idea of creating some sort of fatigue that's negatively going to impact the practice afterwards, that may be a real consideration, but based on how we program it, it tends to not be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because even within the season, even within the sport, there's going to be different variables in terms of different coaches, completely different schedules, whether you're on the West Coast or East Coast and you're playing, games where, like if you're in New York and you're playing the Islanders and Rangers and Devils are all so close together, and in Philly, Boston, and Washington really aren't that far away either. So it becomes a completely different scenario, probably than maybe a Seattle or a Vancouver. I'm sure. Kev, let's talk about. I want to go into movement variability, and you talked about movement variability in one of your newsletters, meaning your body has a wide range of options to produce a desired outcome. Talk about the importance of movement variability, and I feel like the danger is when trainers hear this stuff, it ends up being like just too random. Like they do it for the sake of being having this variability. So talk to me about how you not only you define movement variability, but how does it play out in your practice?
Yeah, I tend to think of movement variability through two different lenses. The first is, micro movement variability, which is really just at the joint level, making sure that the joint has access to the full range of motion that it's intended to have. So, from that perspective, it's, we kind of consider what are the different things that may restrict a joint's range of motion, whether that's, capsular stiffness, whether that's a muscular restriction. It can be a restriction through a fascial chain, and just recognizing that depending on the position of the joint and depending in the direction of movement and the position of adjacent structures, you may find that certain patterns are limited based on different layers of restriction. So for us, really what we're trying to do is attempt to target the same area of the body using different movement patterns in different positions that are just slight variations of each other. So, we'll do for example, like a lateral kneeling adductor mobilization that, you have your one leg, you're in a quadruped position, one leg stretched out, and we'll push the hips back and push the hips forward, try to open up some hip abduction range of motion through hip flexion and extension. So we'll do that. Then we'll do that with the foot externally rotated. So again, you're still opening up some of that range of motion, but now you're changing the position of the hip slightly. You're changing the angle of the stretch through some of the adductors. Then we will also add different patterns of reaching through the upper body. So, a reach under and a thoracic rotation that way, or opening up to the same side. And the idea there is just trying to open up the range of motion that is there. It's easy to access. This isn't a clinical situation where there's, some documented major limitation. This is just finding different ways to get into positions to allow the nervous system to then integrate those into more global movement, which is what I think of more of as macro movement variability, which is, especially in sport, you have these task demands that, you're skating down the ice, a player puts a pass in a certain area and you have to get that. How you are contorting your body to put your stick in a position to accept that pass. Well, there's a lot of different ways to get there. You could rotate more through the hips. You could lean back through your spine. You could rotate more through your thoracic spine. You can change hands with your stick and just reach along behind you with the other hand. And if you got that same pass 1,000 times, you might find a slightly different strategy to accept that pass in that same position every time. And, I think there's a couple different ways that pursuing the goal of giving the player the most strategies to, find solutions to some of these task problems. One I think I've talked a little bit about just from a long-term development standpoint is the importance of playing multiple sports and the impact that has on exposing athletes to different movement demands and space constraints and just different physical skills that may translate into whatever sport they end up pursuing in the future. So that's a big one. From a training standpoint, I think building in multi-directional work, whether it's within the context of really emphasizing the output of it, meaning the speed or the power or the distance covered or, how heavy a ball you're throwing, or just with more of a coordination lens of, can players get into these different positions? Can they move their bodies in different directions and rotational patterns, forward, sideways, single leg, double leg? And is there a level of comfort and control through all those patterns? From a strength training standpoint, I think there's some value in developing strength using the same patterns but in different positions. Meaning if you look at like a upper body horizontal pressing pattern, you could do a bench press and there's a lot of value there. You can do a alternating dumbbell bench press, and now the stabilization and sequencing demands are a little different. If you do a one-arm dumbbell bench press, same thing. Now the challenge to the core and the drive through the same side foot to create some stability changes the way that force is sequencing through the body to create enough stability for you to express that force in the pushing pattern. There's all sorts of cable pressing variations that kind of fall under that same lens. So, I think that there's value, particularly at the stage of development that a lot of our players are at, to where in this, I think, to circle back to your point, everything that I just said needs to be done within the context of minimum competency in those movements. So the idea of like, well, I'm just going to throw a bunch of random stuff at people and hope that they succeed is a recipe for disaster. So, I think that there needs to be a logical thought process of how we're going to teach these things, how we're going to progress these things. And once athletes reach a certain level, there should be an opportunity then to say, all right, somebody knows how to set up and sequence in a half kneeling position, for example. Somebody knows how to set up and sequence in a tall kneeling position. Somebody knows how to do, certain core variations in a standing position. So instead of just saying, I'm going to go 3 weeks in half kneeling and then 3 weeks in tall kneeling and 3 weeks in standing, once players develop a level of competency in those, you can rotate through those, again, not randomly, but not necessarily sticking to one specific pattern for prolonged periods of time. And it's just re-engaging their ability to control those different positions and express strength from them on a more regular basis. So, hopefully that maybe clarifies some of the concerns, because the idea of just throwing random stuff at people, I think is, obviously not the goal of what I'm speaking to here.
Yeah, and I think so. A lot of times what I've seen with the variability idea is this loaded idea of, like, let's say they put a bar on their back and then they're kind of moving around in these different positions, and it just seems more dangerous, but it's all at the, for the sake of movement variability, or so they say. But I like your idea with, like, I've done things with people that I don't see a lot in a week, like maybe twice a week, where I've done a standing cable press in a golf address position, then a split stance, then moving the hips, sequencing, and then changing the feet and working on separation, upper body from lower body, all pressing movement. They get it. It's just a different foot position. And similar to what you said with that stretch, now the foot's in external rotation. And so we're getting it different ways, but in that really globally the same position, but now we're working on a kind of, a little bit of a different position where it's going to help them.
Sure.
Cool. Let's finish up with you had a newsletter about developing breaks for speed, and people, it is pretty popular right now. People do talk a lot about that. I would think, first of all, you're going to do most of that in the off season because you had a lot of eccentric work. But can you go over the 3 load and volume strategies, which were the moderate load, moderate volume, high load, low volume, and moderate load, high speed? Can you just give us a quick overview of each one of those?
Yeah, I think the inspiration for this was really some conversations that Tim Labasi, my assistant, and I have had over the last couple of years about, every year when the season ends and really the months ahead of time, we start to look at our off-season program and look at what areas maybe have we not built in work for based on the needs of that specific off-season based on how the previous season ended. And I think the eccentric training side of things, traditionally, at least in my programs, has really emphasized the strength development and then time under tension. So the 3 areas you just mentioned, moderate load, moderate volume, I think I've used that in the past to just slow the movement down as a teaching strategy for youth athletes. So you have more opportunity to coach different phases of an exercise and make sure that positions in different phases are where you want them to be for the athlete to perform the exercise safely. Obviously there's a time under tension component to muscle hypertrophy as well. So, that can be a strategy where it allows you to check some of those boxes where the load isn't exceptionally high relative to 1 RM strength, but you're accumulating time under tension and or you're slowing down the motion, which can help from a teaching standpoint. The next one, high load, low volume, is more of the traditional just eccentric strength development. This is very low volume, 2 to 5 reps with a longer 3, 5, 7 second eccentric phase traditionally for me. And the benefits of that are increasing the stiffness to support the load for that time, and then obviously for whatever muscle is under load, just developing the eccentric strength across that pattern. I think the one that we probably have overlooked, other than just coaching the landing positions and the transitions of different jump patterns, is this moderate load, high speed. So in sport, a lot of times you're relying on eccentric contractions at a very high velocity. So this is, changing direction or cutting, even kind of the eccentric deceleration of your skating leg in hockey or your running leg. These things are occurring at very rapid velocities. And, the high load, low volume eccentric strength work may help develop the neuromuscular capacity to be successful in those patterns, but you're doing so at a totally different rate of force development than what the sport is requiring. So, we've looked at different strategies to just start to really prioritize the rate of force development in some of these deceleration patterns. And, I posted a video a couple weeks back of like a forward drop lunge holding dumbbells where you can start by just stepping forward and then just hitting the brakes in the bottom of a lunge position as fast as possible. You can progress that by then stepping up and over. So there's more of a downward acceleration to the ground. And then you can start to add more and more load to it, obviously, as well. But, that's been an example, I guess, of this thought process of we want to try to hit in these hip and knee and ankle positions that the player is going to encounter in sport, and then decelerate in as little of a range of motion as possible. So we're maximizing the force and minimizing the time, but then also the displacement that the joints are going through so that they're not needing to then sink far and then push out of some of these patterns. They can stick and go. So that's really the goal is, and some of those strategies are more appropriate for different populations based on where they're at in their development and what the goal is of a specific phase. But I think that last area is an area that we're prioritizing more in our off-season programming this year.
Yeah, I love it. Love that piece of the newsletter. Guys, remember, you can sign up for Kevin's newsletter. And Kevin, what is your website?
It's kevinneeld.com. So it should be pretty easy to
pretty easy.
Me.
And we'll have a link. We'll have a link to that. But I just wanted for the people that weren't going to, who just get it right on thinking. And just some great information, has some really good emails, especially in the off season, because maybe a little more time. But Kev, I really appreciate you coming on. What a great season you guys had, and I wish you luck next season, except for about 3 or 4 of the games and maybe one round of the playoffs. But whatever, man. But no, appreciate you coming on and imparting some of your knowledge, your hockey knowledge, and your athlete knowledge, and I really appreciate it. So thanks again, Kev.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to do for episode 361 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Guys, the show notes are located at continuefit.com or strengthcoachpodcast.com. Don't forget, you can try the new strengthcoach.com out for 7 days for free. Go to strengthcoach.com to start your free 7-day trial. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Online sale right now, 50% off a bunch of stuff, including bumper plates, kettlebells, and dumbbells. The last 2 summits this week is Chicago, not too late, and Providence is coming up in August. Remember, there's nothing like live presentations, especially with the hands-on. You really get a different feel. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Kevin Neeld for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, and off-season training. Thanks to Sumit Seth and Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication to your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, use the referral code STRENGTHCOACH to get started on your free 30-day trial. Thanks to AG1 from Athletic Greens. Visit athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach to get your free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs today. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. My name's Anthony Rena. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.